Hi, my name is Danielle Sicard, and I'm the town clerk here in Easton. I'm here broadcasting to provide residents of Easton and voters with some information in regards to the upcoming state election that will be held on Tuesday, November 6th. First, for the state election, we're pleased to announce that early voting will be available. It'll be available for 2 weeks prior to the election, beginning on Monday, October 22nd, and running through till Friday, November 2nd. Early voting allows voters to exercise their right to vote on their schedules when it's convenient for them. There's no applications necessary, and there's no need to even know your voting precinct. You just need to show up on the day you want to vote during the early voting period. The early voting period between October 22nd and November 2nd is during all business hours at Town Hall. So you can go to Town Hall during any of our business hours to cast your ballot. That includes 2 Monday evenings where we're open until 7:30 p.m. And in addition, we will be open on Saturday, October 27th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the convenience of voters. The Board of Registrars have also designated 3 additional polling locations for early voting. During that time period, we've offered several that offer an early morning ability for those who are commuting. On the Tuesdays, October 23rd and the 30th, you may vote at Frothingham Hall from 8 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. You may also choose to do a 7 a.m. on Thursday, October 25th at the Housing Authority at 1 Parker Terrace. Again, that's 7 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Or the following Thursday, November 1st, at the Residence at 5 Corners from 7 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. All registered voters can appear to vote at any of these locations at any time, so it's not just for the residents or the participants at those other locations. There's a logo on the screen, a blue early voting logo. All of the information that I just reviewed can be found on our website by following this logo. So whether choosing to vote early or to vote on election day, there's some things that voters can do to make sure that they save time and avoid aggravation in preparation for going to the polls or to the early voting sites. There are 4 things in general that I ask that all voters take a look at now prior to voting. 1, are you a registered voter in the town of Easton? The deadline to register to vote is October 17th. The town clerk's office will be open on that day from 8:30 a.m. until 8 o'clock p.m. There's also links on our website that will show you how to register to vote, online. The other thing that you need to know is whether or not you're an active voter or not. Essentially, whether you're listed as an active voter or an inactive voter, you'll have the ability to vote, but you likely have not returned your annual census to the town, and that's why you're listed as an inactive voter. If you check those things now, and you let us, the Office of the Town Clerk's office, know prior to the 17th deadline, we can change your status from inactive to active. If you show up at the polls or the early voting location and you're listed as an inactive voter, you would need to complete additional forms and show an ID to prove that you still reside in the town of Easton. The third item that we ask you to know before you go is your voting precinct. Remember, you do not need to know this if you're going and participating in early voting, but you most definitely need to know this if you show up to appear to vote on election day. When you do show up on the election day, there will be signs that will show you what precincts based on your street name. But again, to avoid aggravation and lines, to save some time, we recommend that voters look up this information in advance. And the fourth thing that voters can do is to find out what you will be voting on. There's a very long ballot that's coming in this election. There are 19 races and 3 questions. The ballot is 2-sided. Voters are encouraged to educate themselves on the many races and these questions that will appear on the ballot prior to appearing to vote at either the early voting sites or at the polls. This will most definitely reduce lines on election day if you've done your homework and are prepared. The logo that's behind me, the red striped with the "Know Before You Go," that will bring you to the town clerk's election page where you can obtain information and also the link to the Secretary of State's website. That is the banner that will now appear and shows "Know Before You Go." Enter your voting information and you'll be able to know whether or not you are a registered voter, whether you're an active or an inactive voter, what your precinct is, and it will also show links to sample ballots and to the state's Red Book of Information that looks like this. It's important, each voter should have received one of these from the Secretary of State's office, and it's important that you read through it and understand the things that you will be voting for on Election Day. Finally, if you decide to just show up at the elections and not take advantage of the early voting, I'm going to take just a few minutes to kind of run through the process on Election Day. First of all, the polling location is at Oliver Ames High School. All voters would proceed to the back entrance near the gymnasium, which is also near the football field. Oliver Ames High School is 100 Lothrop Street, and polls will be open on November 6th from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. We are expecting a very high turnout, with at least 65% or over 10,000 voters are expected to turn out for this particular election. We've worked hard to try to design some traffic flows that will reduce congestion on Election Day. You'll notice when you arrive that there is an entrance and an exit that are different, that bring you to the same parking lot. At the entrance, as I mentioned earlier, will be our street list sign. If you don't know your precinct, you could obtain that information there. From there, you would go to the correct precinct that your street is listed on, and you would need to check in prior to obtaining a ballot. If you come with several people in your household, please note that only one person at a time can approach the table to check in. Also, you'll see that you have the ability to find your name quickly by providing an ID to be scanned. Please note that this is not for ID checking purposes, as the state of Massachusetts does not allow for that. You'd be asked to provide your last name and then your first name and then your street name and number. I'd like to point out that election officials at that time are required by law to repeat that information loudly in the event that there are observers. It is a public record when you obtain and exercise your right to vote, and so they are required to repeat that information. If you are an inactive voter, at that time you would be sent to what we call the warden's table, which is across from the check-in. From there, the warden would need to see your ID to prove that you still reside in the town of Easton at the address in which you are registered to vote. And you would need to sign an affirmation stating under penalties of perjury that you do still reside in the town. And from there, you would obtain your ballot and go into our voting precinct. Ballots are only allowed to be within the voting precinct. So if you've obtained your ballot and you see a neighbor and want to talk to them, you need to wait until after you cast your vote in order to do that, so that you can maintain the order in which the precinct contains all the ballots. When you go into the voting booth, there'll be marking pens provided for you. I will remind you again that this is a two-sided ballot. It's very long. Know before you go so that you can quickly mark your ballot and proceed out to the checkout line. So the pens would be provided for you in order to mark your ballot, whether you're doing a write-in or just filling in the oval. Please note it's important to fill in the oval incomplete. Do not use X's or check marks on your ballot, as the machines will not count those and will not be able to read it unless you filled in the oval completely. After you're done completing your ballot, you will go the opposite end of where you checked in to a checkout table, where once again you will be required to state your name, last name first, first name, and then your voting address and number. The election worker once again is required by law to repeat that loud to make sure that they've obtained the correct voter to check you out. And from there, you'd be permitted to feed your ballot through the ballot box. I will note that if there's a lot of people in line at that point, that the ballot box needs to say "System Ready" on the screen before it can accept the next ballot, and there's not a jam. Again, the traffic flow would be that you would exit not through the same way that you came in the voting precinct, but another exit from the gymnasium to avoid the congestion at the check-in and the checkout. Please note that there's no cell phones allowed to be used while you're in the polling location. You may certainly be texting, but again, we're trying to get voters in and out to reduce the lines. So just leave your cell phones in the car if you need to. You're not allowed to take pictures of your ballot, and you're not allowed to wear campaign materials and leave them inside of the voting booths. I want to just take the time to say thank you in advance for coming and voting either early or on election day. I hope that this information that I've provided gives you the necessary tools to make this a smooth election for both you and for the town and other voters. The two last message are early voting. Save time, aggravation, do it on your schedule. Find that information on our website with the blue banner and come to any of those early voting hours to cast your ballot early. And know before you go, understand what you're voting and what your precinct is, and make sure that you're a registered voter before the deadline of October 17th. And finally, I'd like to point out that absentee voting is still available for this election. Voters must qualify to obtain an absentee ballot. To qualify for an absentee ballot, the voter must be out of the town of Easton on election day, have religious reasons why they cannot vote, or have a physical disability that prevents them from appearing on election day. In addition, voters are asked to only fill out an absentee ballot application if they're not going to be in the town of Easton with the ability to vote early during the 2 weeks prior to the election. One of the populations that we really want to make sure get the chance to vote are college students. So a college student typically would qualify for an absentee ballot, and we would recommend that you fill out that application, and a parent can certainly do that as soon as possible. We're told by the post office to allow 12 to 14 days for absentee ballots to leave our office, make it to where they need to go, and then to be returned in time to count. We would need to receive that ballot back on election day in order for it to count, or before. So this is the time, if you're a college student or you're a parent of a college student and you want to obtain an absentee ballot for your student. Please note, absentee ballots cannot be provided to somebody to take out. They can only be mailed from our office. So once again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your willingness to listen to me speak and to be prepared to go on election day and to know before you go, or to vote early. Thank you.